that's another area where over a very short period of time they really improved. And of course there's still room for more improvement, but they have improved from when I first came here 50 years ago. 我没有想到我会住那么久，本来要来这里一年而已，可是来了以后，我一直在学，开始在买古董，我认为地方越来越好，所以我都没有搬走，我都没有搬回去美国的。最后我差不多4年后，我去找那个我大学的那个法律部门，跟那个最大的老板谈，他说：“哎，你是谁？” Well, it's much easier today than it was 30 years ago. Taiwan's a young country. People forget. Most countries from which most people come, foreigners, are hundreds of years old, whereas Taiwan is new. They really only started in the late 40s, early 1950, the Taiwan of today, before it was under Japanese occupation and Dutch occupation. And so I think it takes time for the country to grow, to diversify. I couldn't buy property before. I mean, there were a lot of things I couldn't do. I couldn't get health insurance, national health insurance, when I first came. Okay, my name is Faye Angevine. I come from America. And as you can see, I have an antique showroom in Taipei, Tianmu.
And how long do you have this antique showroom?
About 48 years.
48 years. So you
48
started
years.
this 48 years ago.
Yeah, we're one of the oldest showrooms in Taiwan, actually.
Why do you decide to start this?
I came here originally to study law,
Law.
but then I became interested in antiques. So while I was studying and also working for law firms, I started collecting antiques, and then I kind of opted. Decided I preferred the antique business to law.
Interesting. So why do you decide to come to Taiwan first?
I came here to study law.
But there are many other places you could go to. Why Taiwan? Back then,
Because I was very interested in Chinese area studies. I was majoring in Chinese area studies, political science. At the time I came, China wasn't very open to the rest of the world. Actually, they were going through the Cultural Revolution, and the programs were much better in Taiwan. So I decided to come here. I also had a friend living in Taiwan who told me, come to Taiwan, so I did.
Okay, before coming to Taiwan, what do you know about Taiwan?
Not very much, actually. Well, I knew about Chiang Kai-shek, Mao Zedong. I didn't know that much about Taiwan's earlier history, although I learned slowly but surely. The government was quasi-Chinese, Nationalist Party, etc. They'd been settled by the Dutch. There were many occupants of Taiwan, the British, the Dutch, the Portuguese, everyone, the Japanese, everyone had occupied Taiwan over short periods of time.
Taiwan 50 years ago and Taiwan now, what has changed?
A lot. Politically, it's changed. Certainly, it's much more modernized now. When I first came, we had very few high-rises, really high apartment buildings. It was under martial law when I first arrived in Taiwan. Very protected.
Would you say Taiwan is more enjoyable back then than now, or would you say now?
I think Taiwan has gone through its periods. Now Taiwan is much more modern. It's not quite as warm and friendly as it was when I first came, but the Taiwanese were very unaccustomed to many Westerners. The U.S. military was here, but they were kind of in secluded areas. So, and there weren't very many Western women living here alone. So, but they're still warm and friendly. Even 50 years later, the Taiwanese are still warm and friendly people, which is one reason why I prefer living here. Traveling around Asia, but having this as my home base, so to say.
How was it like living in Taiwan as a foreigner back then?
Well, first of all, very few Taiwanese spoke Chinese, or spoke English. And when I first arrived, I didn't speak Chinese. I learned slowly but surely going to school. They were very curious about Westerners, but they were a little afraid of us as well. They didn't know how to react to me. I was a Western woman, and they didn't know how to speak to me. And I, of course, didn't speak their language well enough to be able to speak to them very clearly, so we had a slight language barrier. Well, it's much easier today than it was 30 years ago. Taiwan's a young country. People forget. Most countries from which most people come, foreigners, are hundreds of years old, whereas Taiwan is new. They really only started in the late 40s, early 1950, the Taiwan of today, before it was under Japanese occupation and Dutch occupation. And so I think it takes time for the country to grow, to diversify. I think some of their laws are very archaic as far as Westerners are concerned, but they've changed a lot. Today they're quite different than they were when I first came. I couldn't buy property before. I mean, there were a lot of things I couldn't do. I couldn't get health insurance, national health insurance, when I first came. So we bought health insurance elsewhere. A lot of things have changed, and of course there's still room for change. They still need to progress, but they're making an attempt. Well, certainly health-wise, there are areas where Taiwan needs to improve. For instance, I had a Western friend who recently passed away. He had Parkinson's. And in order to get him handicap parking and the care that the Taiwanese would get, impossible. So we've been fighting for that, because that's an example. He lived in Taiwan for many, many years, 40 years, 30 years. He paid taxes every year to the government. And yet when it came to his health, and he had serious problems, couldn't move, his wife had to take him to the hospital quite often, didn't have handicapped areas where they could park the car. And it became very difficult for him. This is an area that needs to change, and hopefully will change. Animals was another situation that's improved immensely. Stray dog situation, stray cat situation. When I first came, they would capture them and put them in cages, and they were eating dog meat at that time. So they'd separate them according to color. And of course that's against the law today. They're not supposed to eat, the Taiwanese are not supposed to eat dog meat. But that's another area where over a very short period of time they really improved. And of course there's still room for more improvement, but they have improved from when I first came here 50 years ago. And when I think of many of the animal welfare organizations elsewhere in the world, whether it be Europe or the States, America, I mean, they've been in existence for over 100 years. We still have problems, but they've been in existence for over 100 years.
Countries. What stands out most about Taiwan?
The friendliness of the people, the warmth of the people, that's one thing that really stands out. They reach out, they're very helpful to people. If you're lost on the street, the Taiwanese will actually stop and, can I help you? They try in their English, and I love it. So I think that's one thing that stands out to me, the people themselves. History as well, I love the diversification between the Yuan Ziming, the indigenous people of Taiwan, the Chinese who have come from China, the Chinese who came years ago during the Ming Dynasty, after the fall of the Ming Dynasty. So you have quite a few backgrounds, different backgrounds among the Taiwanese.
You doing this antique, how are you able to get this stuff? Do you have to go around to places?
Sure. No, I had dealers. I started in Taiwan, buying from dealers and individuals, but then eventually, because my company also does mass production in China, so I traveled to China a lot in the late 70s and 80s and 90s. And so I started buying in China as well. And then I traveled to many countries in Southeast Asia. Went to Japan, Korea. I bought in all those countries. I'm very eclectic, so my antiques come from all over the Far East.
Oh, so it's not only about things in Taiwan, it's about things within the Asian region.
Right. But I love Taiwanese furniture. And it's not known in the rest of the world. People aren't aware of Taiwan furniture, but they had their own style of carpentry, and their carpentry was very good. And during the late Qing Dynasty, the woods were harder, much harder than they are today, because the trees were much larger. And so I really appreciate Taiwanese furniture in particular. As a matter of fact, someday I want to joint venture with someone to sell some of the better pieces, give some, sell some, so we can have a permanent museum for the Taiwanese, showing them their history.
Nice.
Many Taiwanese today are unaware of Taiwanese furniture.
In a business in Taiwan as a foreigner, how difficult is it?
Well, I have problems in the antique business because many Chinese who come here, many Taiwanese who come to buy, they're surprised, first of all, to see a Westerner selling their antiques. Secondly, they're not quite sure if they can speak to me openly. They're afraid to negotiate price. So I do, as a Westerner, probably have more problems dealing with Taiwanese than I do with Western clients. Taiwanese also love to negotiate.
That's right.
And I'm not a great negotiator. So, but as far as trade, the mass production, we don't have a major problem with the factories. Not as much as we do in China.
So you mentioned mass production. What do you produce?
We produce a lot of DIY, outdoor tools, things like that. We do a lot of special items for clients with patents who want them protected, for instance in China. They don't want to take to factories who will copy.
And just now you mentioned not as many problems compared to China. Could you elaborate more on that?
Well, I don't really want to for Chinese. Let's say that if I have a choice in China of working with a Taiwanese factory or a Chinese factory, my chances are I'm going to try to go with the Taiwanese. If they can compete, they're more honest. They're more honest, first of all, and they're more reliable. China's improved a lot, but there are still areas where, you know, they will tell you, oh yeah, fine, we can do it, and then you find out in the end, no.
Interesting. All our links will be in the description below. Facebook, Instagram, and the website will be in the description below.
The Buy Win collection.
Buy One collection.
Buy Win. Yeah.
Buy Win.
Yeah.
Okay, you can go check it out. Buy Win collection. I've spoken to some people who have gotten Taiwanese passport, but claimed no matter how long you've been here, Taiwanese will still not see you as a Taiwanese.
But they see us as a Westerner, and we don't see them as, for instance, if a Chinese is in America, we don't necessarily see them as Americans. we still see the difference in the color of the skin and the shape of the eyes and everything.
Do you have a family here?
No, I'm not married. Well, I have a family of dogs. I collect dogs.
Interesting.
So I have a rescue center. Right now I have 21 dogs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Sometimes the population grows as I acquire more. All of my dogs are handicapped or have some kind of problem. Either they're very large, so their owners didn't want them and dumped them on the streets, or they have 2 or 3 legs, or they're very old, they're blind, whatever. So yeah, that's my family. I will take in foster puppies and find homes for them, but generally the older dogs are more difficult to get adopted anyway, so they usually come to stay permanently.
Do you have anything else to tell Taiwanese people?
Well, I think they're wonderful people, and I think they're very accepting of Westerners. I think they're curious about us, but they are accepting, and I hope we make more progress. Right now we have a textile exhibition, so Qing Dynasty textiles, and some early, some later, and some Indian, Laotian, Burmese. So we're going to probably close it next week and move in other things. We have exhibitions every 2 months. 我们就是每天开，礼拜一到礼拜五11点，早上11点到晚上6点，礼拜六1点到6点，礼拜天如果想看东西，我可以开门，也没有什么大问题。So we're very flexible.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for
Thank you.
giving us this opportunity and sharing this amazing historical stuff.
Yeah.
And hope you continue to prosper here in Taiwan.
Thank you.